All right, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well. Thanks for joining the session, and thanks to everyone who is attending and also organizing Teams Nation. What a great conference! I'm just really thrilled to be here, and that this whole thing is happening. It's just excellent. So, my name is Bob German, and I am a cloud developer advocate at Microsoft, focused on Microsoft 365 development. We're a relatively new group. A little background, I guess. I live near Boston, Mass. I'm actually in southern New Hampshire. I am a Boomerang employee, so I left and came back. While I was away, I became an MVP. So I'm a former MVP, and I've just been building collaborative apps, starting with SharePoint and then using a bunch of other tools, mainly now focused on Microsoft Teams. So the point of this whole talk is really that if you want to build applications for Teams, right now, almost all the documentation and examples and samples and videos and training material and labs, it's all focused on starting a new application from scratch. And a lot of people don't realize that it's possible to migrate existing web-based applications to become Teams applications. So in this role here, I'm actually working with my colleagues, particularly with Rabia Williams, who you may know. She's well known in the PNP community and works on the M365 CLI and a bunch of things. Is a brilliant developer. I get to work with her, which is awesome. And we're building some training material, including hands-on labs, in which instead of saying, hey, just throw away your app and start again, and here's some cool, here's a way to generate the code and stuff like that, we're actually these labs are we're gonna give the developer a working app, and then they will migrate it to become a full-featured Teams app with monetization in the Teams store during the labs. So that's this is a preview of that. They're not ready for prime time yet, but this is a preview of that, and there'll be an opportunity for you to kind of sign up and get notified when they're ready, and maybe do some early testing for us if you're willing. So just a tiny bit of background, I guess, which is that, Teams applications do not run in Microsoft Teams. They could be hosted anywhere on the internet, and Teams stitches your application into the Teams UI, and you'll see all this in action in just a minute. Teams you basically provide this thing called a manifest. So you see on the right of the slide, it says app package, and then inside, which is just a zip file. Inside of there are two icons, images, and a file called manifest.json. So if you have a tab, for example, in your Teams app, that's just a web page, and there's a URL to that web page in the manifest. Similarly, bots and messaging extensions, which run on top of the bot framework, those are just declared in the manifest, and they could be hosted anywhere. They have to be registered with the bot service in Azure. So just kind of wanted to provide that little bit of background before we go into this, so that it makes sense what we're doing. We've got a web-based app. Why couldn't it become a tab? And then why couldn't we add some of these other features to it and then monetize it? And that's what you'll see in the next, during the rest of the session here. Another just quick terminology point, I guess, is really that Teams has these things called scopes for its application. So your app could run in an actual Teams channel. It could run in a group conversation, so a group or a one-on-one chat, or it could run in what's called personal scope, which means that you access it through the left navigation in Teams, and it's just for you. So, but you still get to be kind of in that Teams user interface, kind of one-stop shopping for everything. So as I mentioned, this is something that I think we could do a better job as a company of spreading the word about. Teams was actually designed, the whole app model for Teams was designed with the idea that you or anyone with an existing website or with existing web skills could take that web page, that website, single page app, whatever, and make it into a Teams app, and take a bot maybe that was designed to work with Skype for Business or some other platform like Slack or Facebook Messenger or something, and actually use that in Teams as well. So let's dig into all that. This is kind of my last slide until the very end of the presentation when I'll have some resource links. I mentioned that, and I'll share this link again at the end. If you want to try these labs, that my demos are all based on these same set of labs. If you want to actually get hands-on with it, we're not ready to ship it yet. We're still working out the kinks, but if you go to aka.ms/teams-nation-labs or use this QR, you'll go to a little form where I will personally email you and let you know, what that the labs are available and where they are. I might actually come out with a test version and say, hey, if you could give us a hand testing this before we do a formal launch. So with that, let's move into demo mode for the rest of the session. So I'm going to start out with this with the app itself. And you'll see it has a login. And so we're trying to be real world. One thing about the app, let me show you the app itself. One thing, these are all the different lab kind of end states of the different labs. The lab itself is completely written in JavaScript. It uses Express on the server. So Express being extremely popular, the most popular JavaScript-based web server in the world. And then the client is completely browser native. So there's a fair amount of code here. This is kind of what you're given at the beginning. But hopefully it's understandable to most developers, because if you're a developer, you probably build code that runs in a web browser, which means you've got to know JavaScript. So that's kind of where we're starting from. There's no React, there's no Angular, there's no other learning curves that you have to climb in order to understand what this is about. So here's the starting app, as I said, and it has a simulated login service. There's actually two flavors, and I'm showing the one with the that has a non-Azure Active Directory login. We have another starting point for those who are starting with an Azure AD enabled application, and you'll see more about that. But this is the more interesting use case in a way. So you'll see, again, trying to make it so that wherever the app is, whatever it's doing, you could bring it into Teams, right? So in this case, we've built a little mini bespoke login system. It's not very secure. We don't check the password. The last name of any employee in the Northwind database, the whole thing is based on the Northwind database, if you're familiar with that. The last name is the username, so I can just, and as if that wasn't insecure enough, we're giving you the usernames here. So I'm just going to log in as this user, and what you'll see is that I get logged in. I have this little, log out over here, and who I'm logged in as. Mind you, this is in the Northwind database, and then I can come in and look at my orders. I can come in and click into an order, go in and look at the details. I can look at a product detail and see all the orders for that product. I can go over to products and look at the categories. So if you've ever seen the Northwind database, which is a sample that's been around forever, this data probably looks kind of familiar to you. But we wanted to kind of give the impression of, hey, yeah, this is a business app. It's got business rules, it's got backend data, it's got some authorization rules because these are orders for this particular user, right? And then what we're going to do is take this and make a Teams app manifest. So the manifest looks something like this. Now, I will say, like the normal way that if you said, go build a manifest real quick, right? The normal approach that I would use is I would go to the Teams developer portal, which is here, dev.teams.microsoft.com. And you can come in here and make apps by filling in the forms in here. And it's a great tool. It actually replaces something called App Studio. But the thing is, if you've already got an existing app, and particularly we want to also accommodate independent software vendors and people who are putting out products for sale in the store, they're probably going to migrate that manifest file into source control so that they can keep it in sync with the sources. So that's what we've done here. We have a little script that makes the zip package for you and plugs in all these little values. And the only thing we're going to do here is we're going to make two tabs. These are static tabs, so they're personal, pointing to the My Orders page and the categories, the product categories. And that's it. Very, very simple. I'm not going to go into the details of how the manifest works, but it will be covered eventually in the labs. I think all you really need to know to follow this talk is that the URLs are in there, and that Teams is going to use that to display the app. So let's go into Teams then and take a look. I've already installed that manifest into Teams and installed the app into Teams. And I forgot to do something, right? I have to log out here. Right, okay. So, and you're going to find this a lot, right? So the login page will not run in an iFrame, and Teams presents an iFrame. The tabs are all in either iFrames or embedded browser windows in the mobile clients. So you'll find this a lot with Azure AD included. They will not run in an iFrame. So the first real lab is to fix that. And so let me go ahead and do that. And I'll just start the app again and show you how we did it. So now if I refresh, there's a little refresh button right here, very handy. I actually get this button, this login button, which launches the same login code. No real, very, very minor change to the login page. And I'll pick Andrew this time and be a different user. And now it works, right? So the reason I had that pop-up was because it can't run in an iFrame, but we can run in a pop-up window. So I'm just going to show, like, there's too much here to go into every detail and everything like that, but I'm just going to show kind of the core of each scenario as we go through this. So let me just go to here, identity. I believe I want the Teams login launcher. So here is the button. Here's the page with a little button in it, right? And here is the code. And you'll see that it's really not a lot of code. It's really pretty simple. So what we've got here is we're using the Microsoft Teams JavaScript SDK, bringing that in. And then we're going to initialize the SDK. And then we're going to call Microsoft Teams.authentication.authenticate, which ironically does not authenticate the user. What it does is it launches a pop-up, and then it takes data back from the pop-up and can do something with it. So in this case, we're not even going to use that data because the login scheme that's built in is cookie based. So the login pop-up is going to drop a cookie, and we get in. So that's it. It was just really a question of, instead of displaying the login page right in the web page, we're actually going to just push this little pop-up, point to the login page, and voila, now it's actually working in Teams. But what's the problem with this? This user is logged in to the Northwind login system, and the Teams user, which is me up here, is logged into Azure AD. And this can create a bunch of little problems, right? It's 2 usernames and passwords for users to juggle, and it's even worse for Teams owners and admins. Like, suppose I'm a team owner, and every time somebody joins my team, I need to go into the Northwind app and give them permission to the data or add them to the system, right? And every time somebody leaves the team, I need to remember to go clean that up, or else they might have left the whole company and still have access to that business data if I don't remember to clean it up. So enterprise customers really, really like, and users really, really like one identity system that works for the whole solution from Teams and the app. So guess what? The next lab, that's what we're going to do. We're going to switch from, let me log off this time. Let's see. So what I really want to do is I want to do single sign-on. So I'm going to get a slightly different experience this time. The very first time I log in, and the idea here is we wanted to preserve all of the information about users that was already in the Northwind system, in the proprietary login system, but we want people to log in actually with Azure AD. So what we have to do is kind of connect and link their Teams login, their M365 login with Azure AD to their old Northwind login so that we can connect to their profile information. So if I click the login button this time, I get that same login screen, and I'll log in again. But now what's happened is it's actually going to take my employee ID, and I still have the wrong name because I've just linked to a different user. But the point being that now I can refresh the page, I can go away and come back, and it's always going to log me in transparently. And in fact, I kind of can't log out. There's just literally no way to log out, because as soon as I log out, bang, I get logged right back in again, right? And the way it did that was that it used the Microsoft Graph API to push my employee ID from Northwind into my user profile in Azure AD. So let's take a little peek at the code here, and see what that transparent login is and how that really works. So if I come in here and go to my AAD login, you'll see that this is where I'm going to actually go in and log in and actually get an Azure AD token from Teams that I can use to call my backend service. Now, you may have seen some more complex scenarios around this where we're exchanging the token, but actually it works really easy if you own the front end and the back end, because that token, so it's common if you're an Azure AD identity wonk, you may have heard of access tokens versus ID tokens. A lot of people out there have said that you get an ID token from this get auth token call, but in reality, you get a full access token targeted at your app. So let's look at the other side of this validate Azure AD login. I'm going to come down here to the server side and scroll down quite a bit. And let's see, I want validate and map. I already passed by it, I think. Here it is. So this is how we're going to validate that token. We just grab it off of the headers in our request, and then we're using a little library to check that that token is valid. And then we push the employee ID into the user table so that they line up. So this is a pattern that has been tried and true with a bunch of our partners. And when you do the lab, you actually learn and put it to use. The only thing now about this app is it doesn't really look like Teams. It doesn't have the Teams styling on it. And if I change my theme in Teams, I'm not actually going to get the correct theme. So if I come in here, for instance, and I say, I want the dark theme, right? Oh, it did turn, never mind. I guess it's not very visible though. So anyways, the next, I'm actually, we're still debugging these, so that shouldn't have actually switched, but anyway, the code is in there now. Let's take a look at that. So now this next lab teaches you how to make it look like Teams. And one of my colleagues, Tomomi Amura, actually went into the Figma model and built style sheets for all of the things we were doing. Again, because we didn't want to use React, there's components already there, but we didn't want to rewrite the app. We wanted to just layer on top of the app. So here, this is the same app, the same code, showing the same data. It's just that it is working inside of with the style sheet overriding the styles in the case of Teams, so that everything looks right. And if I switch the theme, the app switches as well. So let's briefly look at that code and just see, how does this app switching stuff work, right? Or this theme switching stuff work? Well, it's a tiny, tiny little piece of code. I think you might like how simple it is. If I come into my modules, Teams helpers, this is it. So it's really, really simple. So this is, first of all, there's this function to say if you're running in Teams or not, and that's another whole little discussion. But here it is, set theme. All we're going to do is initialize the Teams SDK. This is inline code, right? And then we're going to get the context and set the theme, right? Which is just us adding an attribute to the document element, and then she's using CSS variables to actually swap the colors, right? But there's two things. We're going to set the theme to whatever the current theme is in Teams, and then she registers an on-theme change handler, which means this function is going to run if anybody changes the Teams theme, and you can see that then, yes, it sets the correct theme that they just chose. So again, don't rewrite the whole app, just sort of, do that much. Now, the only thing about this is, let's suppose I'm in a chat or let's suppose I'm in a Teams channel, and let's suppose we have a team for the beverages department at Northwind. And so I might be in the team chatting, and then somebody says, hey, I want to talk about the beverages, look at our product line, right? What they're going to have to do is come down here, click into the Northwind app, click on the tab for products. And by the way, notice we hid the built-in navigation, and we're just using the tab navigation now that's built into Teams. Another best practice. And then they'd have to click and go into beverages, and then they'd see the beverages. So that's a lot of clicks, and I've just left the conversation that I was in, right? So in the next lab after this, let me switch over. In the next lab, you will learn to make a configurable page. So in this case, I can come in and set this up. Maybe, let's see if it's installed here. Actually, yep, here it is. So I can come in here, and maybe this is my team. And I'm going to get a configuration page where I can pre-navigate and say, no, I want to show beverages, right? I don't want users to have to go to the product tab and then, I just want to show it right here. And now that's going to work, and it's going to short circuit the user directly to the beverages, so that now that they can just go from their, their Teams conversation or whatnot directly to view the product beverages without any additional navigation. They can open up the chat and actually have a channel conversation about these beverages, right? And interact with the website while they're chatting about the website, and kind of streamline the way that people work. So that's kind of the next whole lab. After this, we're going to get into some other things. So there's a couple that I'm not ready to show yet. One is all about deep linking. So like going from outside of your app into Teams, into your app, into viewing certain data inside the app. And there's another one that is all about task modules, which are pop-up windows. So I don't have those ready for you today, so I'm going to skip over those. But we're also considering adding a meeting app, adding a conversational bot, and I would love to know what you all think you would want to see in here, because we're still kind of gathering feedback. One thing that's pretty important and pretty big is the idea of a messaging extension. So let me show this one, which was written by, several of these were written by my colleagues. This was a Rabia one. So we'll go into here and start it again. And so this is going to add, everything still works the way that it did, right? But we now have a new capability. So let me just go into a chat, and I'll talk to Alice again. And I've already run it in here, so kind of spoiler, I guess. But let's say that Alice is in the warehouse, and we need to check on a certain product. We need to check the inventory, because I'm not sure if the stock level in the database is correct. So what I can do is I can say, hey, Alice, can you check the inventory, please? And then how do I know which product I'm talking about? How do I let Alice understand what product we're talking about? Well, I could give her the product ID, and then she could go to the app and look it up, and then she could update the product, and it'd be a bunch of clicking, and she'd have to remember, maybe she wrote the product ID on the back of a napkin or copied it to her clipboard. It would be a lot easier if we could just kind of streamline that for her. So that's what this does. So if I come into the Northwind Orders messaging extension now, and I can just start typing a name, and what will come up is a list of the products that start with whatever I typed. So, I can keep typing and filter it. If I had more products, it would make more sense. And then I can click that, and I get this adaptive card right here. which is pretty cool. So let me go ahead and send that message. Now, when Alice comes along, and I'm not going to log off and log in, but I could, I'm going to come in here and she finds out that there's actually 40 of these in stock. So she can type it right into the card. And this actually notifies back to the messaging extension that the stock number has been updated, such that if I go back to the products and I find that product, I think that was a condiment, you'll see, hey, my stock has been updated, right? So that just saves, think about how many steps that saves, right? I think when you're building these Teams apps, you really want to think about, how are users actually going to use the app, and what are the scenarios, and how can you save them a bunch of kind of manual integration of copying and pasting and writing things on slips of paper and stuff like that, and just get them so that now Alice could maybe take her phone with this app running on it and go find that product, count the number of SKUs that are in the warehouse, and doesn't have to go back to her workstation, log in, and find the right product and update it. Could be error prone. She's just standing right there and she just said, oh yeah, there's 40 of them. Click and done, right? So that's the kind of integration that we're really looking for. So let's take a look at the code for this one. The messaging extension, again, everything is building on the same app. So the original app still works. So, nothing has stopped, right? There might be users who are outside of Teams still using the app, still using the old login system. Part of what we're doing here is we're not breaking it. We're realizing that maybe somebody's selling the app out there to other customers who aren't on Teams, and they already have a business built around that. We don't want to hurt that business. We just want to add to it with, all of the hundreds of millions of users who are on Teams. So, let's try this one. So I'm going to come into here, and this is all server side. Turns out you need a bot in order to build a messaging extension, and the entire bot is here. So it's fairly simple. It's not a conversational bot. It's more of a utilitarian bot, because what it's going to do is it's going to get these messages when through the bot framework, which is mostly used for security, for authentication at this point, to say, yeah, is it really this app now, or is it really this, this messaging extension from Teams, this Teams app that's calling me? And so if they make this, when the user goes to use it, and they start typing into that messaging extension, this is what's going to get called. Is the framework is going to send, the bot SDK is going to send us over to this Teams messaging extension query and fire an event. And then we can come in here and basically call our own data access layer to get the product by name, right? And now we have the products that match that name, and we can loop through them and build. And the way this works is you actually end up pre-building all of the adaptive cards. So there's little baby cards that go into the message extension pop-up, and then there's the full-sized cards that get shown if somebody clicks one of those. So those are all kind of preloaded. It's the way that it works. So we're going to make 2 sets of attachments here, one for the preview cards and one for the hero cards, and attach those, and then send that back. And when somebody selects one, we're going to take that thumbnail card and kind of update the full adaptive card that's going to go in the channel. And then when they actually click the inventory number, we're going to update that, and that is somewhere down here. Anyway, that is here. So this is the adaptive card action, where we're actually going to update the product inventory, right? So again, we're reusing our whole app, all of our data access, and just adding this bot code on the side, and that also now shows up in the app manifest. So we haven't seen the app manifest in a while. Let's take a quick look back at that to sort of make this all make sense. So at this point, we've added the configurable tab, right? The static tabs are still there. We've added some extra stuff for SSO. This is required. We need the Azure AD information in here to make the single sign-on work. That was like two parts of the demo ago. And then here is the Compose extension. So messaging extensions were originally called Compose extensions, and inside the manifest for compatibility, they still are. So we have to tell it what bot ID we're using. Here's the product search. Find a product. You may have noticed the text that popped up was find a product. And that this is basically just giving Teams the information it needs to know in order to render that messaging extension. So the sort of a very, very important lab, which is kind of almost the conclusion of the experience, I guess, and is my last part of the demo, is around monetization. And I'll point out that there is a talk right after this one by James Skay, where he's going to go into the entire talk about monetization and talk about all the different aspects of monetization in Teams. Monetizing the apps in the Team store, getting them in there, signing up for Partner Center, and doing all the contractual parts and everything like that. So I encourage you, if you're interested, to stay for that, because James is a great presenter, and that will really get you off on the right path to building a monetized. And who doesn't want like a product that just sits there and generates money in the background, even while you're asleep, right? That's the vision here, right? So the way we've kind of put this into the lab is here. Oops, wrong one. And so now if I go into the team, I'm here in the app again, and if I hit refresh, I should get, oops, what happened? Did I not start it? Oh, it took a minute to start for some reason. All right. And, oh, yep, I'm getting an error. Sorry, you need a license. So, wah, wah, wah. Well, of course, you know, we're not giving the app away anymore. We're going to actually charge for it. So, so the way this works is that the commercial marketplace team, in conjunction with Teams engineering and Office engineering, have actually built a complete simulator for, that's not complete, but it's pretty complete, simulator for Microsoft App Source. So when you monetize your app and put it into the Teams store as a monetized app, it also appears in a place called App Source, which is like our online catalog for pretty much all of the software as a service offerings inside of Microsoft and in Azure. So it could be Office add-ins, it could be SharePoint framework, SharePoint web parts, all kinds of things can be sold this way. So we built on, if the labs are built, and there's kind of an intimidating large number of projects here in Visual Studio, but these are for, basically they've covered every kind of add-in or solution that in M365 that you could monetize. So we're just going to use a couple of these, and we're going to use that App Source simulator. So I'm not going to go into this code very much, but let me just kind of talk you through the scenario. If I come to the App Source simulator, so that's here. Here it is. It doesn't really look like App Source, but functionally it's the same, and the calls back and forth are sort of one-to-one. So what's really going on here is I'm going to purchase a subscription, and the licensing is up to you as an app vendor. So that could mean that if you already have a licensing service, you can just use it and you don't need to reinvent it or try to do it our way. You can do it your way. Or if not, then you can actually, write something yourself, and that's what they've done here in this sample. But just to kind of clarify, the App Source simulator has a green background, and my licensing service has a blue background, and my app has a white background. So just so you can see as I navigate around, I'm going to purchase this application, and now I'm still in the App Source simulator, right? And the only type of license that Teams Store supports right now is seat-based, so in a certain number of users. So I'll make it 10. I'll permit 10 users in here, and I'll go ahead and purchase it. Now, what would normally happen is that you would be charged. You could pay with your credit card or a purchase order, or all these different ways, and that's not in the simulator. So pretend that we've paid. And then we get sent over to the application itself, to what's called the landing page. And this is code that was part of that big, repository that I just showed you in Visual Studio that, again, you might just sort of already have a page like this. It's just a place where after they've made the purchase, it's going to come to this page. It's passed in a token here on the URL, which you can see, which this landing page can use with the commercial marketplace API to get back the details of the order. So, oh yeah, it was Bob German who ordered it, and he ordered 10 seats of this application, blah, blah, blah. And by the time you get here, the customer is paid, and Microsoft is going to send you the money for that at the end. So that's great. So now you could put anything here you want. This is a really simple one. We're just going to, it's just going to ask for the location. But, imagine that there's a bunch of different options for your app and different ways of configuring it. You could walk the user through a whole set of interactions here to configure the application for them. And then I can go ahead and, in this case, it's just this one thing. I'm going to go in and the license settings, I'm going to turn on a feature called first come, first served. Just be aware that this is, so that way when people come to use the app, they'll automatically get a license added for them until we run out. And then I could even allow over assignment. This is part of my app in theory, right? If you were doing this for the team store, you would write this page, and you might or might not have a first come, first served, or you might have to add the users manually, or you might or might not have an over assignment feature. These are just all features of this particular app, if that makes sense. And it's going to use now, instead of the Teams and Graph SDKs, it's going to use the Marketplace API, which is a REST API, to just get the information, oh, they bought a subscription, or oh, they renewed it, or oh, they upgraded to a different plan, or oh, their credit card didn't, failed and they didn't really pay, so you got to do something, right? And these things are indicated to your app using webhooks. So without getting into all that, just kind of want to show the concept, and then you can play with some of this in the labs. I'm going to come back to the app and refresh it, and now I'm not going to get the error anymore. And if I go back to the license page and click refresh, you can see that it's added me as having a license, and it's decremented the available license count, right? So that's basically another thing that you would, get to do in the lab and kind of get into this a lot more deeply. So let me just kind of, I said there was only one more slide. We only have 2 minutes left, so I will go ahead and show that last slide. And it's a resources slide. So a few things. First of all, if you want to get into building Teams apps, and if I would say the Teams Toolkit is a great place to start if you're starting from scratch. Power Apps is a great place to start if you're starting from scratch. Power Virtual Agents is a great place to start if you want to build a bot and you're starting from scratch. But if you have already invested in building some kind of web-based application, this is the path that we're trying to open up and clarify for people. It's been there all along. It's just that we haven't done much as a company to explain it. So Robbie and I made this first video, this first link, Get Started with Teams Apps, is a video targeted towards not starting from scratch, targeted towards, yeah, you got to understand how the manifest works and how the APIs work, because we're not going to generate that code for you. But by letting you do it, you can fit it in with your existing code and not have to start over again. We also created a couple other videos, one on Teams SSO, Teams Tab SSO, and we're working on some of the other scenarios like bot SSO, and then also multi-tenant apps, which is something that seems to confuse people a lot. But if you have an app just for most of the app scenarios, again, are for within one company. But if you want to sell it to many companies and have it, work in a lot of different customers, then you're looking at a multi-tenant app. It's actually really easy, but you just have to know what to do. So that's what that next video is. I'll also point you here towards the Teams app samples. So this is actually a browser full of samples of all of the Teams apps that I could find anyways, from both the Patterns and Practices team and from Microsoft itself. So if you're looking for something in a certain language, maybe I really like, I like the JavaScript thing. So here are all the JavaScript samples, right? Or here are all the platform, here are all the Power Apps samples inside of that we have, at least, inside of the Patterns and Practices and publicly shared within Microsoft. So I'll point you to that. So again, another place to kind of quickly get started. Here is that form again. So if you're interested in these labs, if you like what you see and you want to get your hands on it, if you're willing to maybe beta test it, please go fill in the form at teams-nation.aka.ms/teams-nation-tabs. And I'd love to hear from you. And then that big repository with the samples, that's also public. So aka.ms/office app monetization. Oops. And then finally, I want to put in a plug again, right here in the same virtual room. The very next talk is from James Skay, where he's going to go much deeper on monetization, how it works from a partner program point of view, and all of the steps that you would go through once you have a Teams app and you want to get it into the App Store and have it start generating money for you. So we're at time. And so thanks again, and I will open to questions. Oh, virtual applause. That's great. Thank you. Feel free. I don't know if you're able to unmute, but I'm watching the chat. So, and then yes, please do send some feedback. Oh, you're very welcome, Marvin. Good to meet you. So let me go to the last slide. So this is the feedback slide. Ooh, my gosh, my colors are wrong. Sorry about that. But anyway, would love it if you submitted some feedback to us as well. Thomas, you're back.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for this awesome session.
Oh, you're welcome. It was
while being a moderator in a build and extend track provided me with quite a lot of insights into programming and software development stuff. I think that I stopped doing for quite some time now for other ventures.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, awesome stuff, especially as you mentioned before or at the beginning of your session, that quite a lot of people just forget about moving existing apps to Teams.
Yeah, there's a lot of value there. And if you look in the App Store, a lot of them are apps that were already out there and established in the market before they went into Teams. But now, instead of having to kind of do the collaboration in one place and do the app in another place, you can actually start bringing them together and making it more collaborative and save a lot of copying and pasting and things.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. Well, I'll turn it back over to you then, sir. And thank you again for everything. And I'm looking forward to seeing the rest of the conference.
Yeah, thank you for having you.